You are now live.
So now testimony Senate Appropriations Committee is going to take is from Dan Dickerson from Joint Fiscal Office, and he's going to go through the request for the BAA from the Joint Fiscal Office perspective. So thank you, Dan. Sorry we're a little late, but we'll get started. And I don't think this will take a full half hour, but maybe it will. So you're muted, and once you unmute, I'm going to let you take it from there.
Thank you, Senator Kitchell, and thank you, committee, for having me. I'm Dan Dickerson from the Joint Fiscal Office. I have two documents for you today. If you're on your committee page for January 6th, one would be labeled Legislative Branch Presentation, and the other is One-Time Funding Request from JFO. The first document I'm going to walk through is the Legislative Branch Presentation. These are BAA funds that would go into our operating budgets. And so jumping right in total across the branch, we're asking for $295,000 in ongoing money starting in FY22 to fund positions that were either authorized in Act 74 or authorized by the Joint Fiscal Committee back in September. And in order to fund the new spending, well, yeah, it's technically new spending that we didn't receive the appropriations previously, but in order to fund these requests, we're proposing a reversion of $295,000 from the legislative prior year carry forward. And going right into the individual request, the first item is $125,000 within the JFO operating budget under personal services. This would be used to pay for the IT project review consultant that we currently are engaged with. Previously, we had engaged with Dan Smith, and he retired in September. And that work was previously funded in the capital bill, and it's no longer funded in the capital bill. So as of Act 74, what the intent was for JFO to cover the costs for 2 years and then receive a transfer from the legislature. And so we're changing it up a little bit in that we're just asking for operating funds to cover the costs rather than doing the transfer process. And then if at some point, you, the General Assembly, decide that, we no longer need the project review consultant, and we can drop that from our operating budget. But it made me feel more comfortable to just have it there, considering we've had this work ongoing since 2016. Mm-hmm. So that's the first item. The second item is also within the JFO budget under personal services, and this is $65,000 to fund a limited service position that was authorized by the Joint Fiscal Committee at its September 17, 2021 meeting. And this analyst would be providing support in the arena of the American Recovery Plan Act, the state fiscal recovery funding, and also potentially the capital projects funding, and then other areas as they come up. And this just reflects the fact that we've had a lot going on within our office, and so having the extra position, at least over the next few years, will be extremely helpful. $65,000 doesn't cover a full year. The person that we have in that position started back in November, so $65,000 covers the partial year. And then in our FY23 budget, we have, I believe, 100 or 95 or 100,000 built in for a full year of cost for the position. And then finally, this is a request for the legislature's budget, another limited service position, an HR associate. This position was authorized in Act 74 last session, but there was no funding in the legislative budget. And so I'm asking for that funding now. The position's been on board since, I think, July. So the $105,000 will cover pretty much a full year. And that will be an ongoing cost. So the 105 would be in the FY23 budget as well. So those are the three requests that we have for our operating budgets. And like I said, we're proposing a 295,000 reversion from the legislative budget so that it's a net zero on the general fund for those three items.
Committee, just to go back, these were discussed at Joint Fiscal Committee. The ARPA was the ARPA for ARPA is a recognition that just like we were adding positions and horsepower throughout all of state government, the fiscal workload associated with all the federal funds coming into the state has just added to the workload. And so we recognize sometimes we focus on the workload other places, but this is a recognition of the workload on our own staff. And so the other is we're very, very fortunate to have our HR director, Arlene Donovan. Those of us who have worked with her in the Legislative Management Oversight Committee, the amount of work that she has done to really deal with getting a personnel system in place and so forth is more than one person can do right now. The fact that we all are fully staffed for administrative committee assistance is compared to past years has been because of having that resource to help do the recruitment. And so I just want to say that what's being asked for here has been reviewed and discussed, or it's a result of prior decisions, and this is just putting the money where it is required. Any comments from my colleagues on joint fiscal, Senator Westman or Senator Sears? Okay, all right.
They do a good job.
Yeah, they do a good job. And anything else, Dan?
I guess before I move to the other document, I'll just say that everything that I ever went through just now is in the governor's BAA request. So nothing new there.
All right.
The second document has items that aren't in the BAA request. And so I'll jump to that now.
And that's the document that Chrissy sent out to us or this afternoon or this late this morning. Okay.
Yes. So the Joint Fiscal Office is requesting funding for two initiatives that we've been tasked with. One we've carried out and largely completed, and then the other is soon to begin. And we didn't have a sense of the dollars when we went to the administration with our BAA request, and so that's why this isn't in the governor's budget adjustment. And actually, when we went to the House Appropriations Committee, we didn't have the dollar figures yet. So you're the first to hear this, and then I'll have to go back to House Approps. But the first item is in Act 45 of 2021, and I don't remember the exact name of the bill, but it dealt with child care predominantly. We were tasked with hiring an economist or an independent consulting entity to evaluate changes to funding for childcare in Vermont. And we're required to commence this work on or before July 1st of 2022. And the final report from the consultant is due on or before January 15th of 2023. And we're asking for the ability to we're asking for the ability to reimburse JFO from legislative funds for any costs that we incur for this work, hopefully prior to the FY23 budget. And the reason is, timing wise, we're hoping to get an RFP out the door within the next few months and then get those responses back and hopefully have a consultant in place before the big bill passes, so that in the big bill, we could ask for an appropriation to cover the cost. But the reason we're not asking for an appropriation now is if we ask for an appropriation of, say, X amount of money, then we're going to get bids for X amount of money. And so this sort of leaves it a little more up in the air as to what the cost would be, and we'll just see what sort of responses we get back.
And this was part of that very large childcare bill that got passed last year to have this study. So this, recognizing the time frame, this allows us to get moving and on that task that was given to Joint Fiscal Office.
Yeah, and I've proposed some language in the memo. It would be tacked on to E126 of Act 74, and E126 basically, it was a provision that allowed us in FY22 to move money across the legislative branch as needed to close out office budgets. And so I'm adding a subsection B to that, just saying that we have the authority to basically spend money against this work with the hope of, or with the goal of being reimbursed from the legislature, given that the legislature carries a fairly large carry forward balance. And then the second item, we've had a contractor working with the Health Reform Oversight Committee over the past few months, exploring ways of evolving the healthcare regulatory system. And we anticipate the contract to end up costing about $33,000. And so we're asking for that level of funding. And normally I think we would cover it within our carry forward, but Steve retired, Mark retired. We paid out their annual leave balances, and we've had some other consulting work done. So I'm seeing the carry forward balance and our flexibility in the budget shrink pretty rapidly. And so for this item, I'm hoping to get some one-time money to pay for this consultant. And assuming you're okay with it.
Once again, from carry forward, once again, though.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I would be. Go ahead.
Just as some background, the healthcare reform oversight, and Senator Westman, you were there. There was some discussion by the two committee chairs that with the complexity and the work that the health committee in the House and Health and Welfare, that to have a little bit more policy horsepower for the work that they had ahead of them this session. They felt that they could really use some additional policy support and analytical support, and also follow up on some of the recommendations around using the data we have and how to look at regulatory changes. So that is to continue the work, but it's really to begin to make some progress on a number of the key areas in healthcare and the costs of healthcare and the regulatory structure that needs to be in place for the healthcare reform agenda. So that came out of the health reform oversight, recognizing that the recommendations and the work ahead required some additional continuity and resources to carry it out. So that's the genesis of that last request. Anything you want to add, Rich?
No, I think you did a good job.
Okay. That's it, Dan?
That is the entirety of my presentation.
Okay. So the childcare, I know the childcare folks, the advocates, Let's Grow Kids, have been very anxious about that study that was included in the bill that we passed last year, and this gets it moving and then takes care of some of the work ahead of our two subject matter committees on healthcare. Any questions of Dan at this point? Okay. So you'll have all this information, give it to Stephanie, so we don't need to worry about the additional language or whatever that you're requesting here.
Yes, I'll take care of it offline with Stephanie.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. I noticed that we do have the folks from AOT, the secretary and Brad are both here. So I'm going to suggest we move right into the last area of the budget adjustment for today's schedule, and that is the components that relate to the Agency of Transportation. So I'm going to have the secretary outline what is being requested. I think it'll probably tie back into the TIB provisions that we had presented to us a little bit earlier with the Commissioner Gresham's overview of the BAA. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Secretary. I just have a question. If I'm Madam Chair, why isn't it Monsieur Chair?
I'm fine with Monsieur Secretary, Madam Chair.
Monsieur Secretary, huh?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the record, Joe Flynn, Secretary of the Agency of Transportation. And with me today are Jana Morse, the Director of Finance and Administration, Michelle Boomhauer, the Director of Policy, Planning and Intermodal Development, and Bradley Kuchenberger, the CFO. And I will share my screen here. I will attempt to share my screen, and bear with me just a quick second. And let's see here. Just trying to figure out how to make that one big slide. If anybody can remind me, please feel free.
Oh, it's all right the way it is, though.
There we go. Thank you. All right, so we are here for the Agency of the Transportation Budget Adjustment Act. It is fairly brief and straightforward. It consists of two movements. The first is an adjustment due to reorganization within what was the Highway Division to carve out district maintenance and fleet. This occurred just prior to adjournment back in the spring, and it reflects the movement of some employees from one previous division to a different one, and we'll show you that. And it does also include the repayment or the proposed repayment of TIB bonds. So this just walks you through basically the net neutral movement of reorganization. We're altogether taking 7 positions from one division, moving them to a different division along with one piece of equipment. It basically totals out, it's all transportation funds. I can speak more into detail where these people came from. We used to have one large division called the Highway Division, and one element of the Highway Division was maintenance, which are basically all of our VTrans garages. We decided last spring to go back to the model that existed prior to 2013, when everything was put together in one large Highway Division, and that was to carve out maintenance as its own separate division. We did this for several reasons, primarily because it is such a large part of our budget, and we felt that it needed a closer direct connection to the Secretary and the administration. And we did that, we implemented that in May, I believe it was, of 2021. So this just reflects some functions within the Highway Division that really belonged in maintenance. And again, so it's the staff in one piece of equipment reflected here. The second request for budget adjustment is the repayment of $17,400,000 worth of TIB bonds. We are able to do this for a couple of reasons due to increases in forecasted revenue and also increases in the carry forward that we had from the previous year. And that is comprised of the following. In December of 2020, we received $50 million in COVID relief funds from Federal Highway. $12.5 million of those remained unobligated, and we had actually parked those for use in fiscal 23. And with that, we would propose to take $4.8 million in transportation funds, allowing us to pay off the $17.4 million in bonds. And by doing that, we would save $3.9 million over the course of the period of the bonds, allowing us to have more money for local match and also clearing the slate, if you will, for any potential future bonded indebtedness. And this would just be the language that would accomplish that TIB repayment. So that I can just stop sharing my screen here, and then probably be easier to see everybody if there's any questions for myself or the team.
I think we had a pretty good understanding of what you were doing with the TIB. It's 100%. So we're wiping the slate clean with the callable bonds.
Yes.
And that frees up the funds that will help with the match that we're going to have to pony up as a result of the federal infrastructure bill, which we've gotten an estimate of what the match demand will be, which is pretty substantial. So it's one is just the moving the money to go where the reorganization is taking it, and then the other is this proposal to use the funds in this particular way. So I'm going to see if anyone has any questions of the Secretary. Senator Starr.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what is the rate on the bonds that you're going to be paying off, Mr. Secretary?
Senator Starr, I would ask Bradley if he can answer that question for you, sir.
Certainly, Bradley Kuchenberger, Chief Financial Officer, Agency of Transportation for the record. And Senator Starr, there's 3 bonds that we have that were issued in 2010, 12, and 13 respectively. And those interest rates range between 2 and 4.25%.
Yeah, so that would probably higher then than it is right now, so it'd be good to get rid of them.
With inflation, I bet we're going to see an increase in bonds, but okay, other questions? That answers Senator Starr's question. We did get a presentation from Chris Roop about, what will be the match demand with the new federal infrastructure bill. So this is taking the advantage of those extra federal funds that came in and leveraging them in such a way that allows this debt to get paid and freed up more money for match. Okay, other questions that a committee might have?
Are we sure that that's allowable? And we had some questions and stuff last year. I see in budget. No, it's allowable.
Using the money from federal highway for COVID relief that we received in December of last year is allowable for this. We have we've cleared that with the treasurer, and it is allowable.
Okay, good. Just checking. I noticed there were a couple of items in the general fund where we've gone from ARPA funds to general funds because of concerns from Lighthouse. And I use Lighthouse. I've never met them. I love lighthouses.
No, Guidehouse.
Oh, Guidehouse. It's not a lighthouse.
So we like lighthouses too.
It's only Thursday. I'm not sure I like guidehouses.
It kind of,
lighthouses are my
if
favorite.
it doesn't work, it goes black, Dick. It's a guy.
But we've been around you so long, we knew exactly what you meant.
Everybody knew what I meant.
Yeah.
Today I learned what a TIB bond is. Transportation infrastructure bonds. I never knew that before.
Yeah, well, yes. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can let the AOT folks go back to their regular work. It's pretty straightforward, 2 small
Maybe
pieces.
I should ask
One
if
is
they have any lighthouses in the transportation.
We don't.
no, but they've got a really fancy bridge up there in Grand Isle, let me tell you. The replacement of the drawbridge.
How close is that to being done?
You'll be able to drive on the drawbridge next summer, Senator Westman, and it'll go into the following summer with the removal of the temporary bridge that's there.
Yeah.
So it's coming along well, on budget, on time. Construction budget, we did run into the PCBs that we found on the lake, and that required some remediation and cost, but the elements of construction are on budget and on time now.
Great.
I
Well, I think then at that, oh, I'm sorry, Bobby.
Well, I
Go
was just
ahead.
gonna tell the secretary that I appreciate getting those updates on construction jobs within your district. So, you know, when people call, you know what to say to them. Like 105 in Richford has been under construction, a bridge over there too. And so I get updates, you know, quite often from you folks. And it's really helpful to answer questions when constituents call. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree with Bobby. I'm getting them on Route 9, on the Route 9 construction. It is helpful.
Mhm.
There
Yeah,
were a lot on Route 100. I'm very glad you were able to get that finished because there are a lot of complaints there.
We would agree, Senator Nitka. We were very happy to get that finished.
Yeah.
all right. Well, I think then we will let our witnesses go back to their regular day jobs, and we are finished. Is that correct, Chrissy, for today's scheduled testimony?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to end today's committee work.